In 1862, I wrote a poem that chillingly foretold my own murder. The words I penned seemed innocent, but they wove a prophecy that led to my tragic end. Subscribe now to uncover the eerie details of this haunting tale. I was only 19 in 1862, living in a quiet New England village. My days were filled with books, walks, and the scratching of my quill. Poetry was my refuge, a way to spill my soul onto paper. One chilly autumn evening, I sat by the fire, pen in hand. The words came unbidden, as if whispered by an unseen voice. I wrote of shadows, a blade, and a life cut short. The poem felt strange, heavy, like it wasn't entirely mine. I tucked it away in my journal, uneasy but unsure why. The village was peaceful, or so it seemed to me then. I had no enemies, no reason to fear for my life. Yet the poem's imagery lingered, dark and foreboding. I read it again the next day, and it chilled my blood. Was it a warning? A vision? I couldn't tell. All I knew was that those lines held a truth I couldn't grasp. The village was small, with cobblestone paths and whispering pines. Everyone knew each other, or so I thought as I walked to church. I carried my journal everywhere, the poem tucked inside. Its words began to haunt me, echoing in my quiet moments. A shadow moves before the light, a blade in hand, I'd written. I started noticing things, footsteps behind me, too soft to trace. At night, my dreams were filled with faceless figures watching me. I told my friend Eliza about the poem, but she laughed it off. "Poets are dramatic," she said, brushing away my fears. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. I began locking my doors, checking windows before bed. The poem felt like a map to a fate I didn't want to meet. I tried to write other things, but my pen returned to darkness. Each line I wrote seemed to tighten the knot in my chest. Winter came, blanketing the village in snow and silence. I spent more time indoors, my journal my only companion. The poem was there, its ink stark against the yellowing page. I read it obsessively, searching for meaning in its lines. "A heart that beats will soon be still," it said. I started seeing shadows where there should be none. At the market, I felt eyes on me, cold and unyielding. I confided in my brother, who urged me to burn the poem. But I couldn't. It felt like destroying a piece of myself. Instead, I hid it in a locked box under my bed. Still, the words lived in my mind, sharp as a blade. I began to avoid the village square, fearing unseen threats. My world grew smaller, confined by my own dread. The poem was no longer just words, it was a curse. By spring, I was a ghost of myself, pale and withdrawn. I stopped attending socials, too afraid to leave my home. The poem's lines played in my head like a grim lullaby. I started writing letters to my family, just in case. I didn't tell them about the poem, only my love for them. One night, I heard a creak outside my bedroom window. My heart raced as I clutched the locked box tightly. I told myself it was the wind, but I didn't believe it. The village felt different now, its warmth replaced by menace. I saw strangers in the distance, their faces always obscured. I began to wonder if the poem was summoning this fear, or was it revealing a truth I was too blind to see? I prayed for peace, but the words offered none. Every night, I felt closer to the fate I'd written. Summer brought warmth, but no relief from my growing terror. I started noticing patterns, footprints near my garden gate. They were too large to be mine, too deliberate to ignore. I showed them to my neighbor, who dismissed them as animal tracks. But I knew better. The poem had made me certain. "The blade will fall where shadows dance," it warned. I stopped sleeping, too afraid of what the darkness held. I kept a candle burning, its light my only comfort. I wrote more poems, but they all echoed the first. Death, shadows, and a betrayal I couldn't name. I began to suspect everyone, friends, neighbors, even family. The poem had turned my world into a maze of distrust. I felt like a hunted animal, waiting for the strike. Yet part of me still hoped I was wrong, that it was just a poem. One evening, I found my journal open on my desk. I was certain I'd locked it away the night before. The poem's page was marked, a red ribbon placed across it. My hands trembled as I read the lines again, now memorized. I searched my house, but found no signs of an intruder. Still, the violation left me shaking, my fear now tangible. I decided to leave the village, to escape the poem's grip. I packed a small bag, planning to flee to the city. But that night, a storm rolled in, trapping me inside. Lightning illuminated a figure outside my window. I screamed, but the thunder swallowed my voice. The poem's words rang louder than ever in my mind. I clutched a kitchen knife, my only defense. The storm passed, but my resolve to leave did not. The next morning, I told no one of my plans to flee. I slipped out at dawn, my bag hidden under my cloak. The village was quiet, the streets empty in the early light. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I could outrun the poem. But as I passed the old oak, I saw a shadow move. It was quick, too quick, and my heart sank. I hurried my steps, the city still miles away. The poem's lines chased me, relentless and cruel. A life will end beneath the stars, it had said. The sky was clear, but I felt the weight of those stars. I glanced back, and the shadow was closer now. Panic seized me, but I kept moving, driven by fear. I reached the edge of the village, the road stretching ahead. But the shadow was there, waiting, just out of sight. I ran until my lungs burned. The city still too far. The road was lonely, flanked by dense, whispering woods. Every rustle made me jump, every snap a threat. The poem had predicted this. I was sure of it now. I clutched my bag, the locked box inside it heavy. Why had I brought it? Why couldn't I let it go? The shadow was behind me, its presence a cold weight. I stumbled, my foot catching on a root in the path. I fell hard, my bag spilling open, the box tumbling out. The lock broke, and the poem lay exposed in the dirt. Its words seemed to glow under the fading light. I scrambled to my feet, but the shadow was closer. I could hear its breath now, steady and deliberate. The poem had led me here, to this moment, this end. I turned to face the shadow, my knife trembling in my hand. It was no phantom. It was a man, his face hidden by a hood. The poem's final line echoed. The blade will claim its own. I screamed for help, but the wood swallowed my voice. He stepped closer, his blade catching the last of the daylight. I swung my knife, but it was futile, a desperate act. The poem had known this, had written this moment. I felt the cold steel before I saw it move. Pain bloomed, sharp and final, as I fell to the ground. The stars above were bright, just as the poem had said. My journal lay open beside me, the poem's ink fading. I thought of my family, my village, my unwritten words. As my vision darkened, I wondered if I'd summoned this. The poem was my prophecy, and I had fulfilled it. The village mourned me, or so I imagine now. My body was found the next day, the poem beside it. They called it a tragedy, a senseless act of violence. No one connected the poem to my death, not at first. But Eliza read it at my funeral, her voice shaking. The words silenced the crowd, their weight undeniable. They buried me under the oak, my journal in my hands. The killer was never found, the shadow never named. Some whispered of a curse, others of coincidence. But I know the truth. The poem was more than words. It was a vision, a warning I couldn't escape. My story lives on, whispered in the village at night. Subscribe to this channel to explore more haunting tales. The past speaks, if you dare to listen. Years later, my poem resurfaced in the village archives. A scholar found it, intrigued by its eerie precision. She wrote about it, calling it a literary prophecy. The village stirred, old fears awakening in quiet homes. My journal was displayed in a glass case, a relic. People came to read the poem, drawn by its mystery. Some felt a chill, as if my presence lingered nearby. I watched from beyond, a silent witness to their awe. The scholar traced my life, piecing together my final days. She found my letters, my fear woven into every word. But the poem remained the enigma, its origin unclear. Was it divine, demonic, or simply my own mind? The scholar's book sold widely, my story spreading far. My death became a legend, tied forever to those lines. The village changed, but my poem stayed the same. New generations read it, each finding new meaning. Some saw it as a warning, others as a tragic muse. Children dared each other to recite it at midnight. The oak where I was buried became a place of pilgrimage. People left flowers, notes, even their own poems. I felt their grief, their curiosity, their quiet fear. The poem's power grew, its words etched in stone. Scholars debated its meaning, but none knew the truth. I had written my fate, or perhaps it had written me. The shadow's face remained a secret, even to me. Was he a stranger? A friend? The answer was lost. The poem was all that remained, a mirror of my end. Its lines still whispered, calling to those who listened. One night, a young poet came to the oak, journal in hand. She sat by my grave, reading my poem under moonlight. Her own words flowed, inspired by mine, dark and heavy. I felt a pang. Would she, too, write her own doom? She spoke aloud, asking me to guide her pen. I wanted to warn her, to tell her to burn her words. But I was only a shadow now, bound to silence. Her poem spoke of loss, of a life slipping away. I watched her leave, her steps echoing my own. The village slept, unaware of the cycle beginning again. My poem had sparked something, a chain I couldn't break. Her words carried the same weight, the same dread. I feared for her, for the fate she might weave. The poem's curse lived on, beyond my grave. The young poet published her work, and it spread quickly. Readers felt the same chill I had, years before. Her poems were called brilliant, but some saw the danger. A critic noted their similarity to my 1862 lines. He wrote of a haunted lineage in our village's poetry. People began to wonder if the oak itself was cursed. They avoided it at night, fearing my restless spirit. I wanted to scream that it wasn't me, but the words. The young poet grew pale, her eyes haunted like mine. She stopped writing, afraid of what her pen might summon. But her poems were already out there, alive and potent. The village whispered of another tragedy brewing. I could only watch, trapped in my spectral grief. The poem's shadow stretched far beyond my death. Decades passed, and the village became a tourist stop. My story was a draw, my poem printed on postcards. Guides told my tale, embellishing it with ghostly flair. The oak grew larger, its roots curling around my grave. Scholars still studied my journal, seeking new clues. Some claimed I'd been a seer, others a madwoman. But no one could explain the poem's uncanny truth. The young poet's fate remained a mystery, unresolved. Her last poem was found, unfinished, by her bedside. It spoke of a shadow, a blade, and a silenced voice. The parallels were chilling, a mirror of my own end. People stopped writing poetry in the village, afraid. The curse, they said, lived in the act of creation. My poem had become a warning, a tale of dread. One winter, a filmmaker came to tell my story. She walked the village, camera in hand, seeking truth. She filmed the oak, my grave, and the old church. She read my poem aloud, her voice trembling slightly. The villagers watched, some angry, others entranced. They didn't want their quiet lives disturbed by my ghost. But the filmmaker persisted, digging into my past. She found my letters, my fear preserved in ink. She interviewed the scholar who'd found my poem. The film took shape, a blend of fact and eerie fiction. It premiered to crowds who shivered at my words. The poem was the star, its lines haunting the screen. The filmmaker felt it too, a weight she couldn't name. My story lived again, but the truth stayed buried. The film brought more visitors, drawn to the mystery. They left offerings at the oak, poems of their own. Some claimed to see me, a figure in white by the tree. I wanted to tell them I was no ghost, just a girl who wrote a poem that sealed her fate. The village profited, but the air grew heavy. People whispered of new shadows, new footsteps. A young man, a writer, came to study my work. He sat by the oak, reading my poem aloud. His own writing began to mirror mine, dark and fatal. I felt the cycle again, the poem's grip tightening. He published a story, its ending too close to mine. The village held its breath, waiting for tragedy. My poem was alive, its power undimmed by time. The writer vanished one night, his journal left behind. Its pages held a story that echoed my poem's lines. The village searched, but no trace of him was found. My grave became a shrine, a place of fear and wonder. People left candles, their flames flickering in the wind. The poem was copied, shared, its words spreading far. Some called it cursed, others a tragic masterpiece. I watched the village grapple with my legacy. The oak stood silent, its branches heavy with secrets. The poem's lines were carved into its bark, a warning. No one wrote poetry anymore, not near my grave. The fear was too great, the pattern too clear. Yet my words endured, a prophecy unending. I longed for peace, but the poem held me fast. A century passed, and the village was barely a village. Houses stood empty, the oak now a towering giant. My poem was taught in schools, a literary curiosity. Students analyzed it, unaware of its deadly weight. Some felt a chill, a pull they couldn't explain. Teachers warned against reading it alone at night. The oak was fenced off, a monument to my story. Signs told my tale, sanitized for curious tourists. But the poem's power lingered, its words still sharp. A young girl, a poet, found my journal in a library. She read my poem and felt a spark, a dark inspiration. Her own words began to flow, heavy with shadow. I screamed in silence, begging her to stop. The cycle was unbroken, my poem eternal. As I aged, the language became my legacy, taught across continents. Scholars built on my work, finding traces of Eloria in ancient texts. The stone never left my side, its glow a constant reminder. I dreamed rarely now, but when I did, the shadows thanked me. My school grew, filled with voices speaking Eloria's tongue. I wrote a final book, detailing my journey from Eldwood to the gate. It became a beacon for dreamers like me. The village honored me, naming a street after the boy who dreamed. I smiled, knowing it was Eloria's victory. The language lived, its truths alive. My heart was full, my purpose clear. I was ready for what came next. One night, I dreamed of the gate again, its symbols brighter than ever. The guardian appeared, saying my task was done. They showed me Eloria, rebuilt in the minds of those I taught. I woke with tears, the stone cold for the first time. I knew my time was near, but I wasn't afraid. The language would outlive me, carried by others. I gave the stone to a student, a girl with eyes like mine. She promised to protect it, to keep Eloria alive. I wrote a final letter to my parents, thanking them. The scroll rested in the school safe. My dreams were quiet now, my work complete. I felt Eloria's peace. The world changed, but Eloria's language endured, a thread through time. Scholars found ruins matching my descriptions, proving my story. I was too old to travel, but I read their letters, smiling. The stone's new keeper visited, her voice strong with the language. She spoke of new discoveries, new truths. I listened, proud, knowing I played my part. My journal, now a relic, sat in a museum. People came to see it, to hear my story. I stayed in Eldwood, watching the stars. The language hummed in me, a quiet song. I was content, my life woven with Eloria's. The gate was closed, but its light remained. My health faded, but my mind stayed sharp, filled with Eloria's words. Students visited, reading my books aloud. Their voices were my legacy, carrying the language forward. I told them of the guardian, the gate, the city. They believed, their eyes wide with wonder. The stone's keeper wrote to me, saying she'd found another tablet. It bore my symbols, proof of Eloria's reach. I smiled, knowing the truth was spreading. My dreams were rare now, but peaceful. I saw my mother in them, her face soft. The language was my gift to the world. I was ready to rest, my task done. Eloria lived on. One evening, I sat by the river, the same one where I found the stone. The water sparkled, reflecting stars I'd seen in dreams. I spoke the language softly, its words a comfort. A child approached, asking about my journal. I told her of Eloria, her eyes bright with curiosity. She promised to learn the language, to keep it alive. I gave her my old pen, a small token. The stone's keeper sent a letter, saying the language was taught in schools now. I felt Eloria's presence, its truth safe. My heart was light, my journey complete. The stars above seemed to nod, approving. I was at peace. The village held a festival, celebrating the language's spread. Children sang Eloria's words, their voices clear and strong. I watched from my chair, too weak to stand. The stone's keeper came, showing me a new scroll she'd found. It matched mine, its symbols perfect. Scholars spoke of Eloria as fact now, not myth. I smiled, knowing I'd bridged their world to ours. My journal was read aloud, its pages worn but alive. The language was no longer mine alone, it belonged to all. I felt the guardian's hand on my shoulder, unseen but real. My life's work was done. I was ready to go. That night, I dreamed of Eloria one last time, its spires gleaming. The shadows welcomed me, calling me keeper. The guardians stood before me, their face serene. They said the language was safe, its truths eternal. I walked their streets, feeling no pain. The stone glowed in my hand, then faded, its work done. I saw the gate, open and bright. I stepped through, knowing I'd return to the stars. The language sang in me, a final gift. I woke briefly, my room quiet. Eldwood slept, but Eloria lived. I closed my eyes, content. My journey was over. The village mourned me, but I felt no sadness in my final moments. The language was my legacy, carried by thousands now. The stone's keeper wrote of new discoveries, new ruins. Eloria was no longer a dream, it was history. My books filled libraries, my words taught in schools. The scroll rested in a museum, beside my journal. Children spoke Eloria's tongue, their voices a chorus. I saw my mother's face in my last dream, smiling. The guardian stood beside her, nodding. The language had bridged worlds, just as they'd hoped. I let go, my heart full. Eloria was alive, forever. Years later, they say my story became legend, told by firesides. The language spread, uniting scholars and dreamers. The stone's keeper found the gate, keeping its secret safe. Eloria's ruins were studied, its truths shaping minds. My journal inspired others to chase their dreams, to listen to whispers. The language was taught in universities, its symbols on flags. Eldwood became a pilgrimage site, my school its heart. The stars I'd seen in dreams were mapped, named for Eloria. I was gone, but my purpose lived. The guardian's voice echoed in me proud. The language was eternal, my gift to the world. Now in 1855, I am a memory, but Eloria's language thrives. The stone rests with its keeper, glowing faintly. The gate is hidden, but its truths are not. Scholars build on my work, finding new pieces of Eloria. Children dream of its spires, their minds open. My journal is read, its pages worn but cherished. The language connects past to present, a bridge I built. I was the boy who dreamed, the keeper of a lost truth. My story lives in every word spoken, every symbol written. Eloria is no longer lost. Its light shines, and I am at peace. The language is yours now. Carry it forward. If you were captivated by this journey, subscribe to our channel for more stories that uncover hidden truths and spark wonder.